Back Sexton Lovecraft on Kickstarter.
Hello, welcome to my review of A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Before we begin, just a reminder that the Kickstarter campaign for my novel, Sexton Lovecraft, ends on Saturday the 26th. So you are running out of time to back it. If you want a copy, use the link in the description below. On with the review. Princess of Mars was serialized in 1912 in All Story magazine, released 5 years later in the States, and 2 years after that, in 1919, it reached our fair shores as a novel. Burroughs would write 10 more books in the series between this one and 1964's John Carter of Mars, and the enduring popularity of the series inspired Disney to do what they usually do with such things as recently as 2012. Much like Burroughs' other famous property, Tarzan, it begins with an attempt to increase its credibility, an introduction from Burroughs purporting to be executor of Carter's estate, who has found the manuscript among his belongings. Carter's narrative then begins, written in the first person, and he claims to be not quite immortal, but having not aged at all in more than 40 years. In 1866, Carter is prospecting with his partner Powell when they strike gold. Powell leaves to return with the resources they need to properly exploit their find, while Carter remains to guard it. However, a sixth sense tells him that Powell has come to harm, and he goes to check on him. Finds him killed by Indians. He grabs Powell's body from them and then flees into the mountains. Hiding from the pursuit in a cave, he finds himself overcome by an unknown force and passes out. He awakes on Mars, called Barsoom by its inhabitants, and is captured by green Martians, but not before demonstrating that the lower gravity has given him some incredible strengths and abilities. The green Martians are warlike and brutal, but they take Carter in because of those skills. What follows is mostly an encyclopedic explanation of the Martians and their culture. This is detailed and at times a little long. This edition is a mere 160 pages, but Princess of Mars doesn't quite zip along with the same pace as Tarzan. Perhaps because the pages are packed with small text, perhaps because of Carter's inaction. He is, as a prisoner, unable to influence the Martian tribe's movements or activities. By chance, they intercept an exploratory convoy from the Red Martians and attack them, taking prisoners. It is here that Carter catches his first sight of Dejah Thoris and falls in love. It's also a good example of his powerlessness, because she is also held prisoner and he's unable to force a meeting until one is arranged by the tribes as part of their normal activities. Thoris is, like most Martians, naked aside from some jewellery, and this isn't the first trope the book shares with Tarzan. There is a degree of commentary too on the uncivilized nature of the green Martians. Much of this is through the character Solar, who has a chapter devoted to her backstory. She alone was raised by her mother, the rest of the green Martians being raised by whoever they end up with at the hatching ceremony witnessed by Carter. Her unusual upbringing makes her sympathetic and understanding of the Earth customs shared by Carter, and wholly alien to the Martians, who value nothing much beyond war and the means to make it. When Thoris and Carter are eventually both brought before the Green Martian King, one of the Martians assaults her, and Carter fells him with a single blow and announces that he will do the same to anyone else that wrongs her. Unwittingly killing the Martian grants Carter a degree of freedom within the group, but he is still a prisoner, and his plotting to escape is not significantly explored yet, so he remains an observer of their culture and not a lot more. There is a degree of welcome intrigue injected into the group's inner dealings by Sarkosia, another green Martian who spies on them. This group of Martians are on their way to meet with other green Martians, and Thoris, as a princess of the Red Martians, is quite the prize. They expect to execute her when the whole species is together. When the Greens congregate in a city for the gladiatorial games, Carter is able to escape. However, Thoris is recaptured. Carter alone finds an atmospheric plant, and its operator is at first willing to help him, but then tries and fails to kill him. After he leaves, he finds some Red Martians and becomes a scout for them, thanks to the influence of one of their number who he had met as a fellow prisoner among the Greens. Quite the coincidence, but far from the only one. These Reds are fighting Thoris's Reds because Red Martians live in disconnected city-states. But Carter escapes on one of their flying machines, and while completely lost and flying over two factions of warring green Martians, he is hit by a stray shot and crashes. Luckily, he crashes in the middle of a bloody battle right next to the one person he needs to help him, and leveraging the identity of Soja's parents, he enlists his contact among the Greens to persuade them to wage war on the bad Reds and return Thoris to her own city. Quite the coincidence. Lucky Mars is a small planet, and it was only a small battle. 10,000 men had been engaged in that titanic struggle. Anyway, his plan is accomplished, and everyone is 10 years into the happily ever after when the atmosphere plant inexplicably breaks down and everyone has 3 days to live. So Carter sits around moping with his friends, and when everyone is on the very verge of asphyxiation, he remembers that he knows how to fix it. He races off, passes on the secret he knew to the crews working to restart the machine, and then he passes out due to the thin air. And when he wakes up, he's back in the cave on Earth and unable to return to Mars. Burroughs' Mars is heavily influenced by the popularization of Percival Lowell's astronomy. The planet itself is dying, kept alive by the planet's atmosphere processor. Large systems of canals have been built from the poles to bring irrigation to strips of farmland that are surrounded by desert. The Red Martians have a degree of civilization, while the Greens squabble over the rest of the planet's dwindling resources. People who've read any Mars-related science fiction from the following 50 years, especially if it's from the likes of Heinlein or Bradbury, will recognise the planet. Burroughs' influence is equally weighty, and swashbuckling Carter and his rescue of the feisty, beautiful, but imperiled and largely agency-free princess is the root of a lot of adventures from the likes of Flash Gordon to Star Wars. There's a lot to like here, but it lacks the restless verve of its own stablemate Tarzan, and at times is nothing more than a travelogue. For those who like such things, I think it'll be a blast, especially given that while not the first, in 1917 that originality would have had a huge impact on readers, as well as the future disciples previously mentioned. It is extremely similar to John Norman's first Gore novel, Tarnsman of Gore, and with a dispassionate eye, I wouldn't describe it as any better, slightly less perverse, but the first Gore book was far more understated than later entries. But with Thoris and others' nudity played down due to war-year sensibilities, I think that this might have been more risque had circumstances permitted it. But that too lacks the sort of consideration that the same trope is given in Tarzan, and it isn't the only one to just be skated over. The white Martians represent the degeneration caused by civilization, but they are confined to a single chapter, so it isn't so much a theme as an aside. Again, Tarzan tackles the same idea, but even among the hustle and bustle finds time to explore it rather than just mention it. Carter is a gentleman, and he brings a superior civilized attitude to the Martians. But can you portray that as a positive in Carter and a negative in the white Martians? Will Carter's new ways weaken the green Martians going forward, or is there a fine line, this much civilization and no more? I'm not even completely sure Burroughs has a stance on that, because he moves so rapidly over the idea to concentrate on other aspects of their lifestyle. I understand it's contradictory to want Burroughs to move his story along quicker, but also take the time to explore his themes more. It is only 160 pages, but the story seems like an addendum to their ethnography. For sci-fi of this era, and probably even the one to follow, Princess of Mars would probably be described as action-packed, but Burroughs writes his descriptions of the various sites the Martians visit in the same style as he does All-Out War. In this scene, the green Martians are hidden inside a city and ambush the Red Martian airships as they move into the area. Whether they had discovered us or were simply looking at the deserted city, I could not say, but in any event they received a rude reception, for suddenly and without warning the green Martian warriors fired a terrific volley from the windows of the buildings facing the little valley across which the great ships were so peacefully advancing. Instantly the scene changed as by magic. The foremost vessel swung broadside towards us, and bringing her guns into play returned our fire, at the same time moving parallel to our front for a short distance, and then turning back with the evident intention of completing a great circle which would bring her position once more opposite our firing line. The other vessels followed in her wake, each one opening upon us as she swung into position. Our own fire never diminished, and I doubt if 25% of our shots went wild. It had never been given me to see such deadly accuracy of aim, and it seemed as though a little figure on one of the craft dropped at the explosion of each bullet, while the banners and upper works dissolved in spurts of flame as the irresistible projectiles of our warriors mowed through them. In Burroughs' defence, I will say that there was a lot less of this sort of thing to copy and learn from. That what was written in the genre was not studied to see how or why certain things worked well, or at least get the pulse of the reader moving. What is clear, with 100 years between then and now, is that your action scenes are not the place for strings of prepositions. That distantly and dispassionately relating the events using words to play down the enormity of it all is not beneficial to you. In more modern times, we chop our sentences up, sometimes playing fast and loose with grammar, which just was not done back then. And with great respect to the author, there are some nice touches here and there as well. I'm trying to be generous because of the era this was written in, but this is one of the better options, and towards the end it feels like Burroughs really can't be bothered anymore, and battles of profound importance to character and plot are explained away in a handful of words. Dejah Thoris, second in command of the Green Martians, must face off against King Dejah. Thoris is, we have learnt, the noble savage among them, the one Green Martian to love and care for his wife and child. Dejah is the chieftain, a position only attainable through personal prowess in combat. This is the climax to Soldier's story, a key moment in Carter's because Thoris alone can spare Dejah Thoris. This is the scene. There was no alternative. That decree was final, and so Dejah drew his long sword and advanced to meet Dejah Thoris. The combat was soon over, and with his foot upon the neck of the dead monster, Dejah Thoris became Jeddak among the Tharks. Is there not an entire scene missing from here, where the two men fight and Thoris, from the very jaws of defeat, snatches a bloody yet heroic victory? I think Burroughs just ran out of interest because the final showdown, the lifting of the siege around Helium, Dejah's home city, is 2 paragraphs of similar length, even though Burroughs is trying, in that handful of words, to inject an element of doubt about whether the troops from Helium will help the Green Martians Carter is leading. To compare it to another book that I've read recently, the final battle in Sharp is several pages long. In conclusion, I think that contemporary audiences would have been blown away by Princess of Mars. The glamour of Dejah Thoris, the daring heroics and superpowers of John Carter would have been quite thrilling. And I know this because I saw Star Wars as a young boy, and all the notes are the same. The beat, however, is different. Burroughs spends 2/3 of his novel showing you around Mars and barely mentions the action when it happens. Lucas shows Tatooine in 15 minutes and spends the rest of his movie blowing things up. Time has moved on, sci-fi has moved on, and neither move has been kind to Princess of Mars. However, it is important to consider its own role in moving things along, its influence on what has come since. Tansman of Gore is the most blatant rip-off I've read, but that it is maybe just as good, and certainly no better, despite having more than 50 years to practice, shows the enduring quality of Burroughs' work. Carter is a noble hero, a little short of weaknesses and peril perhaps, but an engaging guide on the journey. A remarkable feat of world building, Princess of Mars is recommended mostly for the intrigue around its position in science fiction. Thanks for watching, like and sub for more.